Section 3 of My Life in the South. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. My Life in the South by Jacob Stroyer. Chapter 1, Part 3. A short time after, I was taken to Columbia and Charleston, South Carolina, where they used to have the races. That year, Colonel Singleton won a large sum of money by the well-known horse Captain Minor, and that was the same season that I rode my trial race. The next year, before the time of racing, Colonel Singleton died at his summer seat. After master's death, mistress sold all the race horses, and that put an end to sporting horses in that family. I said that Boney Young, Colonel Singleton's groom, had a brother by the name of Charles, who trained horses for the colonel's brother, John Singleton. Boney was a better trainer, but Charles was a better man to the negroes. It was against the law for a slave to buy spirituous liquors without a ticket, but Charles used to give the boys tickets to buy rum and whiskey with. He also allowed them to steal the neighbors' cows and hogs. I remember that on one occasion his boys killed a cow belonging to a man by the name of Lebrun. Soon after the meat was brought to the stable, Lebrun rode up on horseback with a loaded shotgun and threatened to shoot the party with whom the beef was found. Of course, the negroes' apartments were searched, but as that had been anticipated, Mr. Young had made them put the meat in his apartment, and as it was against the law of South Carolina for a white man to search another's house or any apartment without very strong evidence, the meat was not found. Before searching among the negroes, Mr. Young said to Lebrun, "You may search, but you won't find your beef here, for my boys don't steal." Lebrun answered, "Mr. Young, your word might be true, sir, but I would trust a nigger with money a great deal sooner than I would with cows and hogs." Mr. Young answered, "That might be true, but you won't find your beef here." After their rooms and clothes had been searched, blood was found under some of their fingernails, which increased Lebrun's suspicion that they were the party who stole his cow. But Mr. Young answered, "That blood is from rabbits my boys caught today." Mr. Lebrun tried to scare one of the boys to make him say it was the blood of his cow. Mr. Young said, "Mr. Lebrun, you have searched, and you did not find your beef, as I told you that you would not. Also, I told you that the blood under their fingernails is from rabbits caught today. You will have to take my word, sir, without going to further trouble. Furthermore, these boys belong to Mr. Singleton, and if you want to take further steps, you will have to see him." Finding that he was not allowed to do as he wanted to, Mr. Lebrun made great oaths and threats as he mounted his horse to leave that he would shoot the very first one of those boys he should catch near his cattle. He and Mr. Young never did agree after that. But poor Mr. Young, as good as he was to the negroes, was an enemy to himself, for he was a very hard drinker. People who knew him before I did said they had never seen him drink tea, coffee, or water, but rather rum and whiskey. He drank so hard that he used to go into a crazy fit. He finally put an end to his life by cutting his throat with a razor at a place called Old Hanley's Racecourse, about 3 miles from Columbia, South Carolina. This was done just a few days before one of the great races. Boney Young drank too, but not so hard as Charles. He lived until just after the late war, and while walking one day through one of the streets of the above-named city, dropped dead with what was supposed to have been heart disease. Boney had a mulatto woman named Maria, who had been originally brought from Virginia by Negro traders, but had been sold to several different masters later. The trouble was that she was very beautiful, and wherever she was sold her mistresses became jealous of her, so that she changed owners very often. She was finally sold to Boney Young, who had no wife, and she lived with him until freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. She had 2 daughters. The elder's name was Annie, but we used to call her Sissy. The youngest name was Josephine. Annie looked just like her father, Boney Young, while Josephine looked enough like Charles to have been his daughter. It was easy enough to tell that the mother had sprung from the Negro race, but the girls could pass for white. Their mother, Maria, died in Columbia some time after the war. Annie went off and was married to a white man, but I don't know what became of Josephine. A short time before master's death, he stood security for a Northern man who was cashier of one of the largest banks in the city of Charleston. This man ran away with a large sum of money, leaving the colonel embarrassed, which fact made him very fretful and peevish. He had been none too good before to his slaves, and that made him worse, as you knew that the slaveholders would revenge themselves on the slaves whenever they became angry. I had seen master whip his slaves a great many times, but never so severely as he did that spring before he died. One day before he went to his summer seat he called a man to him, stripped and whipped him so that the blood ran from his body like water thrown upon him in cupfuls, and when the man stepped from the place where he had been tied the blood ran out of his shoes. He said to the man, "You will remember me now, sir, as long as you live." The man answered, "Yes, master, I will." Master went away that spring for the last time. He never returned alive. He died at his summer seat. When they brought his remains home, all the slaves were allowed to stop at home that day to see the last of him and to lament with mistress. After all the slaves who had cared to do so had seen his face, they gathered in groups around mistress to comfort her. They shed false tears, saying, "Never mind, missus, massa gone home to heaven." While some were saying this, others said, "Thank God, massa gone home to hell." Of course, the most of them were glad that he was dead, but they were gathered there for the express purpose of comforting mistress. But after master's death, mistress was a great deal worse than he had been. When the master died, there was a great change of things on the plantation. The creditors came in for settlement, so all the fine horses and some others, such as carriage horses and a few mules also, were sold. The slaves whom master had bought himself had to be sold, but those who had been born on the plantation, given to him by his father, old Colonel Dick Singleton, could not be sold until the grandchildren were of age. As I have stated, my hardships and trials did not end with the race horses. You will now see them in another form. After all the fine horses had been sold, mistress ordered the men and boys who were taking care of the horses to be put into the field, and I was among them, though small. But I had become so attached to the horses that they could get no work out of me, so they began to whip me. But every time they whipped me I would leave the field and run home to the barnyard. Finally mistress engaged a very bad man as overseer in place of old Ben Newsome, whose name was William Turner. 2 or 3 days after his arrival he took me into the field and whipped me until I was sick, so I went home. I went to the mistress and told her that the overseer had whipped me. She asked if I had done the work that he had given me. I told her that master had promised me that when I got too heavy to ride race horses he would send me to learn the carpenter's trade. She asked me if, in case she put me to a trade, I would work, and I told her I would. So she consented. But the overseer did not like the idea of having me work at the trade which was my choice. He said to mistress, "That is the worst thing you can do, madam, to allow a negro to have his choice about what he shall do. I have had some experience as an overseer for many years, and I think I am able to give a correct statement about the nature of negroes in general. I know a gentleman who allowed his negroes to have their own way about things on his plantation, and the result was that they got as high as their master. Besides that, madam, their influence rapidly spreads among the neighbors, and if such should be allowed, South Carolina would have all masters and mistresses and no servants. And as I have said, I know somewhat about the nature of negroes. I notice, madam, that this boy will put you to a great deal of trouble unless you begin to subdue him now while he is young. A very few years' delay will enable him to have a great influence among his fellow negroes, for that boy can read very well now, and you know, madam, it is against the law for a negro to get an education. And if you allow him to work at the carpenter's trade, it will thus afford him the opportunity of acquiring a better education, because he will not be directly under the eye of one who will see that he makes no further advancement." Then mistress asked me, "Can you read, Jacob?" I did not want her to know that I had taken notice of what they were saying, so I answered, "I don't know, ma'am." The overseer said, "He does not know what is meant, madam, but I can make him understand me." Then he took a newspaper from his pocket and said to me, "Can you say these words?" I took the paper and began to read. Then he took it from me. Mistress asked when I had learned to read and who had taught me. The overseer did not know, but said he would find out from me. Turning to me, he took the paper from his pocket again and said, "Jacob, who told you to say words in the book?" I answered, "Nobody, sir. I said them myself." He repeated the question 3 or 4 times, and I gave the same answer every time. Then mistress said, "I think it would be better to put him to trade than to have him in the field, because he will be away from his fellow negroes, and will be less liable to influence them if we can manage to keep him away." The overseer said, "That might be true, madam, but if we can manage to keep him from gaining any more education, he will eventually lose what little he has. And now, madam, if you will allow me to take him in hand, I will bring him out all right without injuring him." Just at this juncture a carriage drove up to the gate, and I ran as usual to open it. The overseer went about his business, and mistress went to speak to the persons in the carriage. I never had a chance to hear their conclusion. A few days after the conversation between the overseer and mistress, I was informed by one of the slaves, who was a carpenter, that she had ordered that I should go to work at the trade with him. This gave me great joy, as I was very anxious to know what they had decided to do with me. I went to my new trade with great delight, and soon began to imagine what a famous carpenter I should make, and what I should say and do when I had learned the trade. Everything seemed to run smoothly with me for about 2 months, when suddenly I was told one morning that I must go into the field to drop cotton seed. But I did not heed the call, as mistress was not at home, and I knew she had just put me to the trade, also that the overseer was trying to get mistress's consent to have me work out in the field. The next morning the overseer came into the carpenter shop and said, "Did I not order ye into the field, sir?" I answered, "Yes, sir." "Well, why did you not go?" I answered, "Mistress has put me here to learn the trade." He said, "I will give ye trade." So he stripped me and gave me a severe whipping, and told me that that was the kind of trade I needed, and said he would give me many of them. The next day I went into the field, and he put me to drop cotton seed, as I was too small to do anything else. I would have made further resistance, but mistress was very far away from home, and I had already learned the lesson that father and mother could render me no help, so I thought submission to him the easiest for me. When I got through with the cotton seed, in about 3 weeks, I went back to the carpenter's shop to work. So he came there and gave me another severe whipping, and said to me, "You want to learn the carpenter's trade, but I will have ye to the trade of the field." But that was the last whipping he gave me, and the last of his whip. A few days after my last whipping, the slaves were ordered down into the swamp across the river to clear up new grounds, while the already cleared grounds were too wet from rain that had fallen that night. Of course I was among them to do my part. That is, while the men quartered up dry trees which had already been felled in the winter, and rolled the logs together, the women, boys, and girls piled the brushes on the log and burned them. We had to cross the river in a flatboat, which was too small to carry over all the slaves at once, so they had to make several trips. Mr. Turner, the overseer, went across in the first flat. He did not ride down to the workplace, but went on foot, while his horse, which was trained to stand alone without being hitched, was left at the landing place. My cousin and I crossed in the last boat. When we had got across, we lingered behind the crowd at the landing. When they were all gone, we went near the horse, and saw the whip with which I was whipped a few days before fastened to the saddle. I said to him, "Here's the whip old Turner whipped me with the other day." He said, "It ought to be put where he will never get it to whip anybody with again." I answered my cousin, "If you will keep the secret, I will put it where old Bill, as we used to call Mr. Turner, will never use it any more." He agreed to keep the secret, and then asked me how I would put the whip away. I told him if he would find me a string and a piece of iron, I would show him how. He ran down to the swamp barn, which was a short distance from the margin of the river, and soon returned with the string and iron exactly suited for the work. I tied the iron to the whip, went to the flatboat, and threw it as far as I could into the river. My cousin and I watched it until it went out of sight under water. Then, as guilty boys generally do after mischievous deeds, we dashed off in a run, hard as we could, among the other negroes, and acted as harmless as possible. Mr. Turner made several inquiries, but he never learned what had become of his whip. A short time after this, in the time of the war, in the year 1863, when a man was going round to the different plantations gathering slaves from their masters to carry off to work on fortifications and to wait on officers, there were 10 slaves sent from Mrs. Singleton's plantation, and I was among them. They carried us to Sullivan's Island at Charleston, South Carolina, and I was there all of that year. I thank God that it afforded me a better chance for an education than I had had at home, and so I was glad to be on the island. Though I had no one to teach me, as I was thrown among those of my fellow negroes who were fully as lame as I was in letters, yet I felt greatly relieved from being under the eye of the overseer, whose intention was to keep me from further advancement. The year after I had gone home I was sent back to Fort Sumter, in the year 1864. I carried my spelling book with me, and although the Northerners were firing upon us, I tried to keep up my study. In July of the same year I was wounded by the Union soldiers on a Wednesday evening. I was taken to the city of Charleston to Dr. Ragg's hospital, and there I stayed until I got well enough to travel, when I was sent to Columbia, where I was when the hour of liberty was proclaimed to me in 1865. This was the year of Jubilee, the year which my father had spoken of in the dark days of slavery, when he and mother sat up late talking of it. He said to mother, "The time will come when this boy and the rest of the children will be their own masters and mistresses." He died 6 years before that day came, but mother is still enjoying liberty with her children. And no doubt my readers would like to know how I was wounded in the war. We were obliged to do our work in the night, as they were firing on us in the day, and on a Wednesday night, just as we went out, we heard the cry of the watchman, "Look out!" There was a little lime house near the southwest corner of the fort, and some 12 or 13 of us ran into it, and all were killed but 2. A shell came down on the lime house and burst, and a piece cut my face open. But as it was not my time to die, I lived to enjoy freedom. I said that when I got so I could travel, I was sent from Dr. Ragg's hospital in Charleston to Colonel Singleton's plantation near Columbia in the last part of the year 1864. I did not do any work during the remainder of that year, because I was unwell from my wound received in the fort. About that time General Sherman came through Georgia with his 100,000 men and camped at Columbia, South Carolina. The slaveholders were very uneasy as to how they should save other valuables, as they saw that slavery was a hopeless case. Mistress had some of her horses, mules, cows, and hogs carried down into the swamp, while the others which were left on the plantation were divided out to the negroes for safe keeping, as she had heard that the Yankees would not take anything belonging to the slaves. A little pig of about 50 or 60 pounds was given to me for safe keeping. A few of the old horses and mules were taken from the plantation by the Union soldiers, but they did not trouble anything else. After Columbia had been burned, and things had somewhat quieted, along in the year 1865, the negroes were asked to give up the cows and hogs given them for safekeeping. All the rest gave up theirs, but mine was not found. No doubt but my readers want to know what had become of it. Well, I will tell you. You all know that Christmas was a great day with both masters and slaves in the South, but the Christmas of 1864 was the greatest which had ever come to the slaves, for although the proclamation did not reach us until 1865, we felt that the chains which had bound us so long were well nigh broken. So I killed the pig that Christmas, gathered all my associates, and we had a great feast, after which we danced the whole week. Mother would not let me have my feast in her cabin, because she was afraid that the white people would charge her with advising me to kill the pig, so I had it in one of the other slaves' cabins. When the overseer asked me for the pig given me, I told him that I had killed it for my Christmas feast. Mistress said to me, "Jacob, why did you not ask me for the pig if you wanted it, rather than take it without permission?" I answered, I would have asked, but thought, as I had it in my hand, it wasn't any use asking for it. The overseer wanted to whip me for it, but as Uncle Sam had already broken the right arm of slavery through the voice of the proclamation of 1863, he was powerless. When the yoke had been taken from my neck, I went to school in Columbia, South Carolina, a while, then to Charleston. Afterward, I came to Worcester, Massachusetts, in February, 1869. I studied quite a while in the evening schools at Worcester, and also a while in the academy of the same place. During that time I was licensed a local preacher of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and sometime later was ordained deacon at Newport, Rhode Island. A short time after my ordination I was sent to Salem, Massachusetts, where I have remained, carrying on religious work among my people, trying in my feeble way to preach that gospel which our blessed Savior intended for the redemption of all mankind, when he proclaimed, "Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel." In the meantime I have been striking steady blows for the improvement of my education, in preparing myself for a field of work among my more unfortunate brethren in the South. I must say that I have been surrounded by many good friends, including the clergy, since I have been in Salem, whose aid has enabled me to serve a short term in the Wesleyan School at Wilbraham, Massachusetts, also to begin a course of theological studies at Talladega College in Alabama, which I am endeavoring to complete by the sale of this publication. End of section 3. Recording by ALWPOE on February 21st, 2011. ALWPOE.com.